the test. And I got a surprise for you. You guys are in the first 3 rows. You're in the prize delivery area. In the gift giving area. So come on up and get a little closer.
All right, welcome everybody to the dam safety technical training. For today, we're talking about safety. I think we built it as confined spaces and other hazards. We have with us today Joe Sabo. Joe is our corporate international health and safety manager and security manager. Joe's retired from the Navy. I'm going to say these letters, and maybe it'll ring true for some of y'all. I don't know if I understand these. EOD and UXO, specialist. EOD. Joe has worked with us for about 17 years at CM Smith, and he's a specialist in remediation in international projects. So let's welcome Joe.
Okay, there you go. Hello, everyone. Well, thanks for being here and taking the time out of your busy day to think about safety. Something that we really don't think about on a daily basis. And when I go out, I do a lot of training. I'm an OSHA outreach trainer. I train for the 10-hour, 30-hour course, specialty trainings for confined space, excavation safety, all types of safety, HAZWOPER safety. You have to think about what's really your responsibility when it comes to safety. So I often go to the OSHA website, and anybody can go to the website. South Carolina has their own OSHA, Occupational Safety and Health Administration. Can everybody see this okay? Is it out of focus for you guys? I'm kind of close here. Everybody okay with that? So I usually start off with this one statistic that I want people to realize it. Everybody see that? New release. So a total of 5,190 fatal work injuries in 2016. And that was the highest since 2008. So of course it takes a little bit of the data to catch up, so it's up there this year also. So when I look at that number, I usually say, wow, 5,000 people with all this technology we have and all this PPE and all this training and all the regulations. 5,190 people went to work, got up, had coffee, drove to work, screamed at the guy for cutting him out, went on the job, and never made it home that night. And never came home that night to see their family again. And these are people that weren't in combat. They weren't in part of a SWAT team. They weren't the fire department. They were just people just like you and me. Every day, get up, take it for granted, go to work. So when it comes to that number, I say to myself, well, could some of those injuries or deaths, fatalities, been prevented? Somewhere along the line, that person at that moment in time made a decision about their own personal safety, and it was the wrong decision. Maybe it was they got away with it before. Oh, we left the tools in the confined space. It was okay. We checked the confined space yesterday. It was okay. But last night they didn't know that they had a spill there, and there was a diesel truck parked there all night long, and the space filled up with carbon monoxide, and they went back in it. Or somebody went up to check out a bridge or on a dam without any type of personal flotation device or had some type of plan. So go back to my mother always saying an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. So isn't it always easy to have some type of plan? Think about something before you do it. And that directly relates to your safety, to your personal safety. So when you look at some of these injuries, everybody see that okay? So this just happened in August in Waterloo. Worker died from a fall from a ladder. Worker was facially crushed between two trailers. Worker fatally struck by a vehicle. Worker fatally struck by a falling tree. Worker executed while installing a light fixture. Could he have prevented that? Could he have secured the power before he installed that light fixture? How about the worker that fell from the tree? Could he had a simple harness on or some type of fall protection? Because you're required to have fall protection on above 4 feet, 6 feet in the construction community. Worker fatally crushed when a bridge truss fell over. Worker died in a vehicle collision. Worker fatally struck by a forklift. And you take a look at this list, and it goes on and on. Worker fell off a scaffold. Fell off a roof. Fell into a silo. Worker died after being caught in a conveyor belt. Think about that kind of death. So when I look at this and I see these fatalities that are people just like you and me, you have to say to yourself, can some of these been prevented? With all this technology and all these things that we got around us to help us plan safety. Has anybody ever followed the health and safety plan at work? Reviewed one? Put their name on it, that they read it? How about a confined space? Has anybody ever worked in a confined space before? A permit required, one guy. Was that a permit required confined space where you had to sign in? As you can tell, if you look at these, the workplace is a pretty dangerous place to be. But yet, people take it for granted. So when OSHA looks at this, they come back and they said, hey, what's causing all of these accidents and these fatalities? By looking at this list, what would you think would be one of the ones that would be causing it? Anybody? What's that? Falls. Very good. Falls are the #1 injury producer on a construction site. Anything else? Well, when OSHA took a look at this list, they said, well, tell us what's causing the most injury. And they came up with 4. And they called this the fatal 4, where OSHA tried to put a government nomenclature on it. They called it the focus 4. And they were falls, struck by hazards, something fell on you or you got hit by a piece of equipment, caught between, a guy got caught with a conveyor belt, or he went into an excavation that wasn't guarded and it was caved in on. And last but not least, the guy with the light fixture. By simply clicking that circuit breaker off, he probably could have saved his life. But yet, he was electrocuted. So falls, struck by, caught between and electrocution. So when I think about safety and I'm doing some type of work that involves this, I usually say to myself, hey, am I doing one of these that are the fatal four? Should I plan this? Should I have a fall protection harness on, since falls are the #1 injury producer? Should I secure the power before I do electrical work? Guess what the #1 is now? The biggest injury producer now. Struck by. So when we have construction sites out on the road, we usually go out there to do safety inspections, evaluations of PPE, or whatever the case may be. And we talk to the guys out there on the construction site, and we say, hey, you guys ever have anybody drive into the construction site? So we have people driving the construction site every day. Every day. Because people can't put down that phone. They have to check that Facebook message while they're doing 55 miles an hour. They have to see what that text said. And they just did a study with that, looking at that phone while you're driving is the same exact thing as driving while you're under the influence. And they're doing all kinds of things to try to prevent it. But they're trying to say, hey, slow down. My mother works here. My father works here. To appeal to your compassion. How about speeding fines doubled while you're in the construction zone? But people still can't put that phone down. And it's the #1 injury and killer right now is a struck by hazard. So if you could do yourself a favor and your family and your coworkers, think about this list. Think about those 5,190 people that went to work just like you and me. Never came home that night. Just because they went to work. It's the employer's responsibility to make sure that you know the hazards that you're exposed to. That's called the HAZCOM program. It's the law. It's the written law. So if an employer asks you to do something and there's a hazard involved with that, they're supposed to actually make sure you know about the hazard, train you for the hazard, provide you the proper PPE, and give you all the information or access to that information, especially if you're working with chemicals. That's why they have the SDSs, safety data sheets, that you need to know before you expose yourself or expose any of your coworkers to something that can cause harm. So think about this list when you're thinking about working out there. General safety only takes 5 minutes to talk about it. Hey, what do we got to do today? Well, we're inspecting this dam. We might have to go up on top and take a look at the failure of it or what kind of conditions it. Well, for 5 minutes, can I talk about a little bit about safety? Well, how are we going to get up there? Is the footing okay? Is the ladder secure? Do we need fall protection? How about if somebody falls in the water? How are we going to get him out? Can that person swim when he's got work boots on? So 5 minutes of planning and the proper PPE can not only save your life and your coworkers, can prevent you from making this list. And that's the name of the game. You don't want to be on this list. It means you don't get any Christmas presents anymore and stuff. You know, your birthdays are over. You know? No more ball games, no more cold beer on Friday nights. So try not to make this list. Do us all a favor. Today we're actually going to talk a little bit about confined space entry. And if you ever worked or heard about a confined space or thought about whether it's a confined space or not, it's another dangerous place to work. And I'm here to tell you, you have to be aware of going into something because there's lots of hazards in confined spaces. So the better awareness you have about hazard recognition, what can hurt me? What can I do about it? And how can I prevent this from happening to my coworkers? You answer those 3 questions, and you start at the first steps of having a game plan together for a safety plan and something to follow. So it's all about personal responsibility, but it comes down to your personal safety. When you lose a couple of close friends at work, especially when the kind of work that I was in, kind of replays on yourself to say, what could we have done different? Especially if you see a hazard and then you fail to say something about it, that you could have prevented that. Oh, I should have told that guy not to go up there about fall protection. I should have told that guy not to go into confined space, it was dangerous. I had the training once. All right? So we'll talk a little bit about, we're going to watch a quick video on confined space and the dangers of that, and we'll talk a little bit. Anybody have any questions about this list or where you can get this information? Well, drowning is another hazard that you would be exposed to in a confined space if there was a lockout, tagout, or you fell off of a dam. Is that what you're addressing? Yeah, it would fall right in there. Drowning is another cause of death that could be prevented just by having a flotation on, or some type of recovery plan, or some type of life ring that they have in a treatment plant. So drowning falls right up there with an important factor if you can expose it. And again, it's right out of the OSHA guidelines and the OSHA responsibility, plain and simple in black and white. If there is a hazard or a chance that somebody can drown, they have to have a vest on type 4 life vest. Okay, does anybody see the... Yes. That one. Awesome. Awesome. There's always a guy who knows computers and better than I do. Oh, I go. This is nowhere. Shortcut. Okay. That's my PowerPoint. Okay. Double check it. Booting. Pull this out. Sorry about that. Usually works like automatic on my computer. It's these new computers. everybody kicking as they play.
Oh, it doesn't know what software to use.
Okay. Try that one. Okay. So, no, it's not my computer. It's no problem. Well, we could jump right into the PowerPoint if we can't figure this out. I'll tell you what, we'll just jump into PowerPoint then.
Okay.
Get this.
It should be done soon, but
You see it loading already?
let's download it. There we go.
Okay, so wait for Windows 10. Sorry about that. Hey guys, don't copy this program. Okay. Sorry about that. Not my fault. Let's blame the computer. My computer probably would work. All right, so we're going to talk about confined space that are permit required. There's two types of confined spaces. Injury statistics, of course, involve that 20 workers die annually, 60% of the confined space injuries sustained by the rescuer. Think about that for a second. 2/3 of the people that die in confined space are the would-be rescuers. So instead of having a rescue plan in place, they were overcome by compassion to see that their coworker, or even in cases their family member, passed out inside of a confined space, went into the confined space to help for a rescue, weren't certified for the rescue, and also passed away. So what's a confined space? Often people usually say, you know, well, a worker can enter and perform work. Limited means of entry and access, so if you have to climb through a manhole or walk down into a tank or a vat. Not designated for continuous occupancy. Kind of makes sense. You wouldn't want to live there. So what's a permit required confined space? It contains or has the potential to contain a hazardous atmosphere. That's why you would never ever go into a space unless you actually tested the atmosphere. You'd have to have a 4-gas meter on you, test the atmosphere. That requires what? Oxygen, no hazardous chemicals or atmosphere, no explosive gas, methane, before you would enter it. Contains the potential for engulfment, okay, for a lockout, tagout. Habit of, I went into a sewer or a dam that was leaking and all of a sudden it gave loose and I was engulfed by 1 million gallons of water. Internal configuration that could trap or asphyxiate me. Means that trapped air, trapped heavier than air, you walk into a space and you go into, you're breathing okay until you get to an area where the gas is now different because it's heavier than air. And any other serious health hazard. Typical spaces are chemical storage tanks, waste and storage pits, grain bins, underground tunnels, railroad cars under construction. Utility closets. These are non-permit required spaces. Below grade trenches, storage vaults, utility sub-basements. So if you walk onto a treatment plant or a chemical facility, a refinery, it's the employer's responsibility to actually go to these confined spaces and designate them and put signage up that will actually say danger. Permit required confined space, do not enter. So, you really have to have a screw loose if you're going to go into one of these spaces that is designated a permit required confined space. It tells you not to enter. So how about when you see a space that doesn't have signage and you're out there away from everybody and you're out there inspecting a dam, you definitely want to say to yourself, hey, well, this might have the potential to be a permit required space. I don't have the necessary training. I don't have the necessary equipment. I don't have any rescue in place. So I'm not going to expose myself or my coworkers to go in to investigate this space. And anytime you actually break the plane of the space, so if this was a hole and I put my head through there, I already broke the plane. Guess what? You violated your confined space permit regulations. So also to work confined spaces, you have to be trained as an entrant. That's the person going into the space. The attendant, that's the person who's outside the space and he's monitoring the guy. All right? You're going to have an entry supervisor who signs off on the permit to make sure all the safety is in place before anybody enters the space. And then most importantly, you're going to have rescue in place. So the entry supervisor, all right, he would be the guy who verifies the permit, because if it's permit required, it has to follow these regulations. and these stipulations and all the factors before you can actually go into that space. He oversees the operation. He ensures the rescues are available. He terminates the permit. He also recommends procedures and changes. So he's the guy that actually makes sure that all the work is done and the safety is in place before the permit could be approved and the confined space operation can be achieved. The attendant duties, like I said, the attendant is the guy outside. He knows the hazards of the space. He's the guy actually filling out the permit. Stays outside the space, communicates with the entrance. So his main duty in life is those people in the confined space. And if you don't have one of those, then you're not going to go into a confined space. If that's your responsibility as the attendant, you're not going to be leaving there and letting those guys hang. You know, that means you're not going to be checking out your girlfriend's Facebook messages and what she's posting that day. You're going to be focused on those guys in that confined space. You're also going to have rescue notifications for non-entry rescues. And you're going to keep unauthorized person away, stay focused on the entrance. This kind of brings up that one statement where it says keep unauthorized personnel away. I remember a project in Jacksonville. It wasn't our company, but another company had been doing some work in a manhole. And they went through all the confined space procedures. They ventilated the space. They checked the space out. And sure enough, at lunchtime, they saddled up and said, let's go get something to eat. What they failed to do is close the space down. So kids get off the school bus. Next thing you know, the kid's up. There's a hole. Challenge you to go down the hole. Who's scared to go down? Boom. Kids went down there, never came up. It was their responsibility as the attendant to make sure that was closed up. And of course, stay focused on the entrance. How they feeling? Are they overheating? They have any type of symptoms of carbon dioxide, carbon monoxide? You have to know all these hazards. You're also monitoring the atmosphere with your gas meter. So if you don't have this gas meter in place and you're not monitoring the gas, the oxygen, carbon monoxide, you can't be in there. You can't be doing your work. What about the rescue responsibilities? A lot of times I'll get a confined space permit for approval, and I'll look through the permit, it looks perfect, and the last thing is in there that asks about the rescue. And I often see is my rescue is 911. That's not approval for me. Because by the time you call 911, because your coworker went down into a space and is passed out breathing some type of poisonous gas or no oxygen, do you think 911 is going to really rescue that guy? That's more of a body recovery. So you have to coordinate with rescue to make sure that these people can actually go in the space, have the ability to pull somebody out of a space, and have the necessary equipment to go into it. Be certified emergency first aid. Understand the entry procedure, how to use rescue equipment, annually practice. That's what fire departments usually do in rescue. If you go onto refineries, a lot of treatment plants also have their own rescue teams put in place. So you have to have this. This is why this is an important part of the confined space hazard awareness. Atmospheric hazards, of course, lack of oxygen. That's the first thing you're always going to test for if you're actually thinking about going into space. Does anybody know how much oxygen in the air? Say again? Roughly 20%. All right, the rest of it's nitrogen, carbon monoxide, trace gas, rayon, yada, 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 ozone. But our body needs at least 19.5% to support life. Once oxygen gets below 19.5%, the easiest things that you do every day now become difficult. When I was in the Navy, I was in the diving community, and we did a lot of test diving. And one of the chambers I was in, they started to turn down the oxygen levels. while we were in there. So I went from 19.5, right about 19, things really started to get hazy. You couldn't even tie your shoe, clap your hands, just from that lack of oxygen. And we take it for granted because it's all around us. And everybody listens to that speech on the airplane about, oh, if we lose oxygen, the oxygen mask's going to drop by. That's how important it is. Because if you can't have O2, 19.5%, you're history. You're on the list. And that's why it's so important for confined. That's the first thing you check for confined space. Next thing you check, for combustible gas and dust, carbon monoxide, which is one of the biggest killers. And it only takes 50 parts per million of carbon monoxide to start to affect your body. It directly interferes with the hemoglobin that carry oxygen in your blood. For some reason, when your hemoglobin sees carbon monoxide enter your bloodstream, it readily bonds with your carbon monoxide 200 times faster than it will oxygen. It's almost like it's a sugar or a drug. And it bombards that molecule so oxygen has nowhere to be carried on the hemoglobin. So when they tell you you have a carbon monoxide exposure, they say, get that person to fresh air. Guess what? You need to be on 100% oxygen. And this is also part of the plan. Another toxic gases, if I'm working at a facility where there's lots of chlorine gas, I'm going to take that precaution. They're at a hazard. Also, what am I bringing into the confined space? Am I bringing hazards in there? Am I bringing fuels? Am I bringing electrical tools? Am I producing, remember the saying, the potential to become a space, a hazardous space? Confined space, hazardous, any questions? Any questions about what is a confined space? So what is a confined space? Very good. Here's our first giveaway. That was somebody paying attention. Pass that back to that gentleman. Don't keep that. What else is a confined space if it's not for continuous occupancy? Limited entrance. Very good. Limited mobility to get in and out. Another winner. See, I told you guys sitting in the back, this was the... Okay, and last but not least, what is it? What did we say? Not made for continuous occupancy, limited entry, and has the potential, has a hazardous space or has the potential to become a hazardous space. Testing and monitoring, direct reading instrument. So before I go into any spacing, I want to have a direct reading instrument, and that's usually a 4-gas monitor. And what's the first thing you check for? Who said that? Awesome. Look at these guys are paying attention. There you go. That's not a candy bar. That's something really cool. Okay. Next thing you want to make sure that device is calibrated, and you check it for every 4 feet. Why would you have to do that? Check every 4 feet of depth. Because each gas has its own property, right? Helium floats, chlorine sinks, carbon monoxide sinks. So each gas has its own property. It's called the law of partial pressures. All right? So each gas has its own gas. So if you check every 4 feet, especially right here where I'm breathing, where I'm working, that's probably pretty important. or if it's a flammable gas down on the bottom where I have electrical tools, that's pretty important. And the entrant, of course, observes also the monitoring. Anybody going into space has to have protective equipment, right? Personal protective equipment. Remember that word personal. It has to be for you, your personal safety. And that would include goggles and glasses and a shield, a respirator, if you were entering a hazardous space. Gloves and boots and clothing, head protection and hearing protection, depending on what kind of work I'm doing in there. 9 out of 10 times, you guys are just going to be doing inspections. So you definitely want to take some type of precaution if you're going to go into a permit required confined space. Tools and equipment. How about a fire extinguisher? That would probably be good. First aid kits, non-sparking tools, explosive-proof lighting equipment, especially if you're working in an area where there's flammable gases. Communication equipment. How about if I'm the attendant and my entrant is way down on the other side of the pipeline? Don't I want to be talking to him, saying, how you doing? How you feeling? You want to come out for a break? And of course, you want to have their rescue equipment in place. A lot of the rescue they're talking about is an actual harness. Well, and we'll get to that. Also, you're going to have to evacuate the space immediately anytime the attendant or the entry supervisor gives the order to evacuate. Hey, I'm looking at the gas monitor and it's saying that the carbon monoxide is building up in there. Or the gas is starting to get, or the oxygen is getting low. Get out. Any sign or symptom of exposure. Maybe you're overheating. You detect a prohibited condition, an evacuation alarm is activated. A lot of these 4-gas monitors have 3 types of alarms. They have a visual alarm, an audible alarm, and a vibratory alarm. That way, if you're working with equipment, if you're wearing one of these, it starts to vibrate like your phone. You get all nervous when that phone vibrates in your pocket. You got to look at that phone. It's like, whoa, what did that do? Emergency rescue, response and rescue. So self-rescue if possible. That's always a good idea if I'm working in a manhole to have a harness on and a tripod retrieval device that I can get that person out, because as the attendant, I'm not going to enter that space. It's against my training. It's against everything. And you saw that 2/3 of the would-be rescuers become the victims. So you're going to make every possible effort to retrieve that person with some type of retrieval line. And that's why it's always good to have the harness on in advance. If the rescue team comes to get you, how difficult would it be to try to put a harness on a guy who's unconscious to try to get him out? So part of the training would, of course, be let's wear the harness ahead of time. Full body harness with a lifeline, visual, verbal communications, attempt from untangled lines and mechanical device and fixed points. These are all part of a non-entry rescue. And that would be the attendant who would perform that rescue. To have a rescue in place, you'd have to have a trained rescue squad. And that's what we pay the fire department for. Sometimes, though, if you don't coordinate this rescue, a lot of these local fire departments aren't equipped or aren't trained because they don't have the funding to do a confined space rescue. So that's why you have to, as part of the permit, call the rescue team, say, hey, we're doing a confined space entry. This is where it's located. 9 out of 10 times, these guys are more than happy to come and assist you and see these spaces to make sure that they can perform the rescue. They also practice the rescue annually. On the Shell refinery where I worked in Deer Park in Houston, Texas, we had a CDM had a big job down there. Shell refinery had their own rescue people. They weren't waiting for the fire department. So they trained their own individual employees in rescue, in first aid, properly equipped them, and performed annual rescues for training. So if they knew somebody went down, they had a team on standby ready to go assist them. So it wouldn't be a body recovery, it would be an actual rescue. Also, they have the proper PPE, notifying some of the attendant. The attendant, of course, will notify them. And then, of course, if there's outside rescue services. Death from asphyxiation, that's when, of course, not enough oxygen in the air, some type of a chemical is asphyxiating you. Worker wanted to examine a pipe, told not to without a permit and PPE. Worker entered the space anyway. The worker collapsed. Co-worker called the rescue squad. And like I said, it became a body recovery. And that guy got on the list for free. And then when you're working safely, any questions? Any questions about your duties of an entrance or an attendant or a supervisor? Go ahead. Go ahead, sir. Yes. Anytime that you're going to enter a space, all right, that you don't know what the hazards are because you don't have any way to check the atmosphere, you don't know how to shut off what's coming down that pipe because that pipe is used to transfer something, water most likely, right? So how do I secure that water on the other end, right? How do I know what's in that pipe that I'm going to be walking through? Is it hazardous? Is it sewage? Is it raw? Whatever the case may be. So what you're doing is you're exposing yourself to that hazards, and they're unknown. So that definitely falls into the confined space category. Can the supervisor and the attendant be the same individual? Yes. OSHA recognize the fact that these smaller teams, that it's not a big job, you're going in just to do an inspection. The attendant, if properly trained, can complete the permit, fill it out. He has to have confined space training by OSHA, all right, be certified, and say, okay, I'm the supervisor and I'm also the attendant, and I know my responsibilities is not to enter the space. And he knows the attendant, and he can do the self-rescue or an assisted rescue. That would be the attendant's duties and responsibilities, and he could be dual-hatted. Good question. You don't get a gift, though. What else thing? Observe the air monitoring, all right? Follow safe work practices by having the equipment, by having the training, by having the rescue in place. Be prepared for rescue activities. And that could be anything that can cause, hey, there's a rain event coming, and I got guys working down here, but this thing might fill up with water. There's an electrical storm, there's a fire, whatever the case may be. Your purpose in life as the attendant is those guys in that hole. Because once you're inside there, you're shut off from the outside. You're focused on being inside the hole or inside the space. Any questions? Any questions on what a confined space is and what the dangers are? The biggest thing you could take away from any type of safety training is remembering that list, not becoming a statistics. Because it comes right down to it, it's personal responsibility. All right, and we all push the limit. Hey, speed limit's 55 miles an hour. I did 70 yesterday. Then you get over that hump and he's waiting there for you with a radar gun. Hey, I'm just going to stand up on this chair and change this light bulb. It'll only take me 2 minutes to go in the garage to get the ladder, shut the power off and do it. Guy with the light fixture didn't do that. Electrocute it. Don't forget, too, that you're also thinking about safety at work. Think about safety while you're driving. Don't look at the phone. Looking at a phone now in 42 states can cost you a lot of money. But it can cost you your life or somebody else's life. We're reviewing videos now because we have a lot of video people who drive fleet vehicles. So I got the opportunity to observe some of the driving and texting videos. And the actual people on camera texting and driving. And pretty awful. And they prove that it's just, as much as you think that you can multitask, that's a myth. Your brain can't do it. Your brain can only function on one part. So when you look at that phone, you're not driving anymore. The car's driving, and it's driving where it wants to go. If you're caught in California with a phone in your hand, all the cop has to do is see you with a phone in your hand, $500. $500. So I don't know, I'm not from South Carolina, so I don't know what the law is for texting and driving. So getting back to personal safety, if you take safety away from work and you take it home and you demonstrate safety in front of your children, what's going to happen? You're going to have less accidents at home and less injuries to your children, right? Aren't we all raised, look 2 ways before you cross the street? Don't do that, don't do that. But then when they see you do something, standing on a chair changing a light bulb, well, Dad did that. All right. That's all I got. Anybody else have anything? Questions? Yes, sir. Okay, so good question. The question was, what kind of footwear would I recommend if you're going to be doing some type of inspection? Okay, so back to the OSHA requirement. If you look at the OSHA requirement for construction sites, the dam's not a construction site, but they just said a sturdy leather boot is what they recommend. If they say there's a possibility where your toes could be crushed, then you're required to wear steel-tip shoes. So there's no possibility that your toe is going to be crushed in a dam inspection, all right? And I have the potential to fall in the water with heavy boots. I want some type of boot that I can get off really quick. Or I want some type of lightweight boot that gives support, gives ankle support since you'll be climbing, and gives you a little bit more stability with good soles that don't slip. Because what happens on top of those dams, moss grows up there, so you got rough concrete, break loose, whatever the case may be. Again, the planning has to be in place. Just a 5-minute safety discussion about, okay, if somebody goes over the edge and falls in the water, how are we going to get that guy out of there? That's what you need to be thinking about. Good question. Anybody else have any questions? Boat safety, another one. Do you actually use any type of boats while you're doing the bridge inspections? Okay. Again, what OSHA and South Carolina OSHA states as a regulation, if you have the potential to become a drowning victim, you have to have flotation devices. All right? That's why when you get on a ferry, the first thing they do is they show you what? Where the life preservers are. You're flying over water on an aircraft, what do they show you? The person's putting the flotation device on and telling you exactly where it is. So if I'm inside a boat, I want to be wearing flotation. And I want to have some type of, how am I going to get out of the water and climb back in the boat? Or be able to be rescued by a rope or a line. So you have to have that part of your safety plan. So anytime you're working in a boat, there's potential for you going in the water, have some type of flotation device and rescue plan, recovery plan. Good question. Anybody else? Yes, sir. Sure. So, okay, so you're talking about confined space? Yeah, so if you become a confined space qualified individual, what the OSHA regulation says that you're required to go through the confined space training, all right, which is going to, of course, show you all the hazards, how to work the equipment, how to measure the gas, how to read the monitors, how to wear the harness, how to inspect it, how to assemble the retrieval devices, all right, all the responsibilities for the supervisor. They show you the permit, how to fill out the permit, to complete the permit checklist, what type of rescue to be involved with. So once you have that training, that's good for as long as you want to keep it, all right? It's also good to have a refresher, you know? But you have to be certified or qualified by your company to perform any type of confined space entry. You just can't go in there. Not only is it against the policy, just think about the liability involved. You went into a confined space and you end up on this list. OSHA is going to come back to that employer. Not only that, that victim's family is probably going to come back to the employer and say, why did my husband or my daughter enter this space and die? Well, they weren't properly trained, they were told not to, yada, 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 and then the courts got it. Good question. Yes, ma'am. No, the rescue team should be separate. If you're conducting a confined space entry and you're building a, which is a permit required because there's hazards in that space. You're saying, okay, I'm going to go into this confined space and there's possible hazards in there. There's no oxygen, there's engulfment, whatever the case may be. I have to complete a permit. And on that permit has who am I calling for rescue. So what you want to have to do is call rescue in advance and say, hey, local fire department, we are doing this work. Can you guys provide confined space rescue? They might say, no, we're not on duty, we don't have the ability, we don't have the equipment. Or they could say, notify these people, or we'll be glad to help you and we'll send the people out and have a truck on standby. That's what you want. You want to have people right there if you're doing a hazardous entry. Good question. Anybody else? Okay. EOD is explosive ordnance disposal. That means that any type of munition that the military ever had, explosives, IEDs, terrorist devices, you're trained to actually dismantle that. So, in essence, you're a bomb technician. So, once you're a bomb technician, you have to not only qualify to do bombs, you have to get to the bomb. So you have to qualify. When I was in the Navy, we had to become a Navy diver because there might be a mine or it might be a torpedo. So you have to get through all that training as well, just to get to the work. So anything that, of course, now you can tell that it's a pretty popular job. You know, you're paying a lot of money. I might even quit and go back into it. No, never. But that's what an EOD guy does. That's just the bomb guy. I was an explosive asset for SEAL Team 2 and SEAL Team 4. Did a lot of work with those guys in Kuwait. So, good old days. Anybody else? I don't think we have time for it, do you? Do we have time to? You could try it. It's up to you. It's about a 20-minute film and it just goes over everything I just explained. It's up to you guys. You want to watch a video if we can get it running? It's the same thing I just talked about. It's got a lot more tense, you know, people actually dying in it and everything. Okay. All right, thank you.